Hello, I'm Esther Gidui Ewart. It's Friday, August 11th. This is Africa 54. The West African bloc ECOWAS activates a standby force for possible intervention in Niger, and the African Union says it will support the regional bloc's decisions. The deaths of young African migrants trying to cross the Mediterranean into Europe by boat have not deterred others from taking the perilous journey. Why are they leaving the continent? We'll have a report. And the Organization of African Unity, OAU, was formally established in 1963 by 32 independent African leaders. Mekonnen Ketema, the son of the man said to have played a major role in the creation of OAU, talks to VOA's Yeheyes Wuhib about his father's achievements. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. The streets are calm in the Nigerian capital of Niamey on Friday, but tensions are rising between Niger's military junta and the economic community of West African states. ECOWAS has ordered troops deployed to restore Niger's troubled democracy. It has directed a standby force to restore constitutional order in Niger after last Sunday's deadline to reinstate ousted President Mohamed Bazoum expired. It isn't clear when or where the force will deploy and which countries would contribute. The announcement of the standby force on Thursday came just hours after two Western officials told the Associated Press that Niger's junta had said they would kill Bazoum if neighboring countries attempted any military intervention. Here's VOA's Paul Ndiho with more.
Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu Thursday chaired a meeting of the Economic Community of West African States in Abuja to discuss the ongoing political situation in Niger.
As you may recall, we called the junta to rescind the decision of them toppling a democratically elected government. We proceeded to impose sanctions with the hope that this resolute measure will serve as a catalyst for the restoration of the constitutional order in Niger.
West African leaders have approved the deployment of a standby force to reset constitutional order in Niger. ECOWAS did not provide details on the force or the timetable for action.
Direct the Committee of the Chief of Defense Staff to activate the ECOWAS standby force with all its elements immediately.
ECOWAS has already imposed harsh economic and travel sanctions on Niger, but there is no indication that the coup leaders are willing to budge or reinstate the country's ousted President Mohamed Bazoum. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is voicing his support for ECOWAS without explicitly calling for military intervention.
ECOWAS, the organization that brings together West African countries, is playing a lead role in making clear the imperative of the return to constitutional order, and we very much support ECOWAS's leadership and work on this.
Annalise Maned, a security expert on West Africa, says a possible use of force against the junta in Niger is likely to cause an escalation of tensions in the region.
This is a significant next step and certainly an escalation of tensions, at least between the regional bloc and the junta bloc that seems to be forming right now, between Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger specifically.
Niger is the fourth ECOWAS member state to undergo a coup in at least 3 years, and the international community is scrambling to solve the country's leadership crisis peacefully. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
For more on Niger's political crisis, I'm joined live via Skype from here in Washington by Daniel Eisinger, a research fellow at the Africa Center for Strategic Studies at the National Defense University. Daniel, welcome again to Africa 54.
Be here with you.
Now, there's a growing concern, Daniel, about the life of Niger's ousted President Mohamed Bazoum after the junta said they would kill him if neighboring countries attempt any military intervention. How concerned is the United States about Bazoum's life and what can be done?
Well, I think everyone right now is very concerned about President Bazoum. He's been held hostage now for 16 days, reportedly under awful conditions, no electricity, no running water, no access to doctors or health care, and limited supplies of food for him and his family. We're hearing credible accounts from officials who have been in touch with the coup leaders that they've threatened Bazoum's life. And, this should be seen as a major setback for peace and security in the region where this form of political violence hasn't been seen in decades. It's quite clear that the leaders of this power grab realize that President Bazoum is really their only bargaining chip. And it's incumbent on the entire international community, including regional leaders, to make clear that they hold the junta responsible for President Bazoum's well-being, as well as his family's, and that they should be released immediately.
You know, Daniel, as we mentioned earlier, the regional body ECOWAS says it has directed a standby force to restore constitutional order in Niger. But given the junta's opposition to this move, is it even possible to think they could reverse this coup?
I think the coup must be reversed. ECOWAS has come to an inflection point. If this coup in Niger is allowed to stand, it sets a terrible precedent, not just for West Africa, but for the entire continent. The multiple coups in Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso in the last 3 years have marked nothing less than an attempt by military actors to assert their entitlement to govern. And this is an affront to civil-military relations. It's a disavowal of democratic governance and norms. It harkens back to the failed military governments during the 70s and 80s, a period that many assumed in West Africa was over. I think that's why ECOWAS see more coups, and if it's not confronted, then this trend of coups is just going to continue. I mean, what's to stop the next set of special forces commanders from believing that they can just take up arms against their government and steal power the way that we've seen now in these other countries? I mean, this is an emerging pattern, and ECOWAS needs to take a hard stance now in order to put an end to it.
Daniel, now ECOWAS spokesperson says there is another planned meeting possible next week in Ghana. Do you think it's time to consider including the junta in this conversation to save Niger from deteriorating further?
I mean, I think that, ECOWAS has made it very clear that the door is open to the junta to engage in diplomatic conversations. And the junta has decided very, very strategically not to engage in those discussions. They've refused mediation, and in the meantime, they've been trying to consolidate their support at home. The military's support for the coup and their unity around the junta is far from clear. The junta's removed officers who aren't loyalists. They've been quickly appointing hardline supporters to positions of power. They're working on that consolidation at home, all in the effort of trying to stall here and gain a better position in Yeheyes. They're not interested in sharing power or stepping down. They're entrenching themselves and holding a democratically elected president hostage, and that's exactly how they'll govern. There will be no room for accommodation, no room for dissenting voices, and no room for course correction. This is a terrible outcome, and I think that ECOWAS is right to keep the door open for democratic discussions, but the junta is the one that's really ultimately got to make the decision that they're willing to engage.
Daniel, many thanks for your insight. Daniel,
my pleasure.
Right. Daniel Eisengar is a research fellow at the Africa Center for Strategic Studies. Amid the humanitarian crisis in Sudan, aid donors have provided some $1.5 billion in assistance. Non-profit groups working in the conflict area say that funding is inadequate and the shortfall is causing major challenges. Meanwhile, those fleeing Sudan say the humanitarian response in neighboring countries is so bad they are returning home. Henry Wilkins has the latest.
Anai Wuol is one of hundreds of thousands who have fled Sudan in recent weeks, escaping the conflict which is tearing the country apart. He describes conditions in the capital, Khartoum.
The conditions people are going through in Khartoum are extremely bad. Many want to get out, but can't do so because of the financial difficulties of finding money for transport.
Yet some of those who have already fled here to Renk in neighbouring South Sudan say the conditions are so bad they want to go back to war-torn Sudan.
It's mostly hunger that drives people to go back to Sudan. If we're provided with food, healthcare and tents, then there won't be any need for us to go back.
VOA spoke to others who said they planned to go back, and to community leaders who said that some people have already returned to Sudan. Non-profits have complained that the $1.5 billion in humanitarian funding pledged since Sudan's war started in April represents only around half of what's needed and will cause problems in responding at scale to the crisis. Mark Wood, a programme associate at the advocacy group Refugees International, says donors are reluctant to work with unfamiliar local NGOs in Sudan and won't give them funding.
It is heavily frustrating for us in the humanitarian field and humanitarian space to see Sudan not getting as much attention as it should. But we encourage donor nations to be more flexible with their funding and to not be as stringent and to, put aside the bureaucratic red tape and be more flexible with their funding, and so that they can address what is actually happening on the ground in real time.
David Del Conte, a humanitarian and policy consultant, says the international community was not fully prepared for the intensity of the war in Sudan and the humanitarian crisis it would trigger.
That led to a rather myopic look at how much funding would be needed for the situation. I think the international community can start putting pressure on the parties, stop cutting off the income source of the parties, stop cutting off the trade routes for the parties to force the parties to the table. And that really hasn't been done in a meaningful way.
Experts also cited donor fatigue, which has been especially pronounced since the pandemic caused countries to look inwards, as well as the continuing Ukraine crisis. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Renk, South Sudan.
Now to the United States, where Hawaii's Office of Consumer Protection is instituting a price freeze for all commodities on the island of Maui after devastating fires have killed more than 50 people and 1,000 people are still missing. The Consumer Protection Office says the price freeze is in effect at least until the end of August. Items affected under the freeze include food, water, ice, gasoline, cooking fuel, batteries, generators, medical supplies, and construction materials. According to the OCP, Maui's historic resort town of Lahaina has been largely reduced to ashes. The recent uptick in migration deaths from young immigrants in Western African countries is prompting concern. For a look into why young Africans are leaving the region and what can be done to address the issue, VOA's Anthony Labruto spoke to several African natives.
More and more African migrants continue to make the journey from their home countries in the sub-Saharan northward on the continent, eventually moving on to Europe. Sadly, many of these border crossings come at a significant cost to migrants looking to start better lives. For many young people on the continent, the decision to leave is not one that many consider before they enter the workforce. Especially for university graduates, private sector job opportunities are often few and far between. Out of desperation, many make the difficult decision to move abroad. Zachariah Kanda, who recently attended a fellowship in the United States, the job market in Niger, his home country, is not developed enough to offer the job opportunities in the kind of field he wants to get into.
I would say most of the time people leave the region because they don't see light coming. Most of the time, they don't see opportunities. You may have many students graduating from university, but at the end, they become jobless because there's no job opportunities. And yeah, it creates frustration.
Many migrants and those planning to immigrate are lured to Europe or the United States by false narratives. Greater connectivity to the internet allows young Africans to see idealized versions of life abroad without any context about what happens behind the camera.
When you live in a place where you don't see any hope, you don't dream, you feel like there's no life for you there. So the only way for you is, okay, you're almost dead here. So even if you die in the ocean, it doesn't matter. But once you reach there in America, it's like a dream come true.
Many are hopeful that this can be undone. Osman Jalani, a refugee who resettled in Kenya, believes that African leaders can empower young people so they can make a decent living at home.
African leaders need more empowerment and awarenesses and sensitization of their youth to create more jobs, security, justice, and inclusivity of every human being living in their country.
Zachariah Kanda also believes that his generation can be part of the solution by going back to Africa to help people understand the realities of life in Western nations.
The reason why I decided to come back home is to change that narrative. It's totally wrong. It's totally not the best. That's not what I see in America. In America, what people think here in my country is just crazy. It's not the reality. The reality is another thing.
Meanwhile, North African countries continue to brace for unprecedented numbers of young sub-Saharan migrants looking to cross their borders, seeking a better life in Europe. Anthony Labruto, VOA News, Washington.
Still to come, Dwayne Richmond stars as the legendary Nigerian Fela Kuti. We'll be right back.
You're watching VOA's Red Carpet. My name is Jackson Vunganyi. Thank you so much for joining us each week right here on Red Carpet. We bring you the latest in
In other news, former South African President Jacob Zuma is free. He returned to prison on Friday after his parole was ruled invalid, only to be released less than 2 hours later under a new program to reduce overcrowding in jails. The action raises serious doubts over whether the 81-year-old is receiving preferential treatment to avoid serving out a 15-month sentence for contempt of court. Tunisia and Libya have agreed to share responsibility for providing shelter for hundreds of migrants, mostly from sub-Saharan Africa, stranded at their border. The migrants, many of whom have been stranded for over a month, had been driven to the desert by Tunisian authorities and left there to fend for themselves. And Sweden has knocked Japan out of the Women's World Cup on Friday by a score of 2-1. With Japan out of the tournament, this year's World Cup will crown a first-time winner. Sweden will now play in the semi-finals on Tuesday against Spain. The Organization of African Unity was formally established in 1963 by 32 independent African leaders. Emperor Haile Selassie's foreign minister at that time, Ketema Yifro, is said to have played a major role in the creation of the OAU. His son, Mekonnen Ketema, has penned a biography about his father's achievements. He talked to VOA's Yeheyes Wuhib.
Africa needed an organization. That because, in order for us to solve our problems, we needed that organization, and that whole concept of African problems needs African solutions, a divide in the continent, and he had to go around 32 countries to.
So he actually went to 32 individual countries and talked to 32 individual leaders.
Their leaders and their foreign ministers as well.
Amazing.
And he had to convince them that, there's a meeting in Addis. We have planned a meeting in May, that you all have to come and participate. And through that, there will be some kind of unity. And we'll create an organization as well. And these were big leaders. We're talking about Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, Modibo Keita, and Tafawa Balewa on the other side, Houphouët Boigny. These are big names and charismatic leaders who stuck to their ideas. Like Kwame Nkrumah, he wanted unity now. And they said no. So, and a few things happened too. During that time, the president of Togo was killed during a coup d'etat. So that even made it worse, one blaming the other. So the situation was really bad when my father went out to ask them to come to Addis. And some were not even in speaking terms. But he convinced them, though. He convinced them that, and I believe there are several reasons. they know that he was a true Pan-Africanist because they've seen his work in freedom, how he helped freedom fighters and how he was advocating for the continent. And he had made very good friends with the leaders and their foreign ministers. So I think that helped him a lot. And he had this personality as well. And he had the knack of convincing people to see it his way.
So he had these two groups joined as one, but there was this minor issue which kind of morphed into a major issue, the diplomatic battle that your father had to deal with a number of African leaders like Nigeria, Egypt, Senegal. Each country wanted the Organization of African Unity headquarters in their own cities.
True.
So how did your father rectify that problem?
Well, it was a huge prize to have the OAU headquartered in your capital because that makes you the de facto capital of Africa. So it was, and so my father, it was, there was a foreign ministers meeting in Dakar, and prior to that, Francophone countries had put their hat in and said, we want Dakar to be the headquarters of the OAU. Nigeria had said that too. So he went to that meeting, and he had several friends, though, like the Guinea delegation, which was led by Ismail Touré, the president's brother. And there was Diallo Telly there. He was a very good friend of my father. And there was Abdelaziz Bouteflika. And so many others, like the foreign minister of Bouteflika. Yeah, they used to call each other brothers back then. And then there was Khalifa Smart of Sierra Leone. So he talked to them first. He got their backing. And then he decided to talk to the Francophone countries. And he convinced them that at the end, since everyone was going to vote for Addis, why not make it unanimous? That's what he told them. And he convinced them, and they voted for Addis, including a neighbor that was at odds with Ethiopia. The Somali foreign minister also voted for Addis, which made it perfect, I
think you have actually resuscitated and resurrected your father's legacy, don't you think so?
I hope that people will be able to read it and understand the work and sacrifices that he made to better his people, the African people.
And thank you for your input.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Mekonnen Ketema speaking to VOA's Yeheyes Wuhib. It's time now for our entertainment report, and joining us now is Heather Maxwell with a very special guest. Hello, Heather.
Hi, Esther. Yes, that is right. In 2009, the musical Fela, based on the legendary Nigerian Afrobeat pioneer Fela Kuti, hit Broadway and enjoyed tremendous success, including world tours. Well, it is back, and here to talk with me about it is today's Fela, as played by Dwayne Richmond.
Yes.
Hello, Dwayne. Welcome to the platform.
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
Thank you. How are you feeling? You had a show last night. You probably have one tonight.
I'm feeling good. It's now in my body, so I'm just on autopilot.
I see. Well, let's take a listen to one of your most recent performances here at the Only, and we'll come back. Wow, Dwayne, that is amazing. So what does it feel like to be Fela?
Man, where should I begin? Well, it's definitely exciting. It's a powerful experience, I should say. I've been doing the show for quite some time now, so learning about Fela, understanding who the man was, not only just within his music, but the political activists of his life and just what he stood for. Not just for Nigerians, but just for Africa in general. I'm honored to play him. Feels good.
So you played you played some of Fela way back.
Yeah.
In what, 2009, 10?
No, not that far back. I joined the Broadway show around 2011.
Okay.
And I did my first show in, I think it was Philadelphia, towards the end of 2011, and then 2012, I jumped on the tour with them, and I got back to Broadway for their second run, and I did it in 2013, and then did another national tour with the company.
Okay, so this is not new for you.
Not at all.
Not at all.
You're
originally from Sierra Leone.
Yes, Sierra Leone, Salom Bobo, as we say.
All right. Born in Freetown?
Yes, Freetown.
Yeah. But you've lived here a long time. Tell
I have. I've been here since I was 10 years old, so I've been here for quite some time.
Yeah.
You know, my journey started in Sierra Leone. I never knew that America was in the distant future for me, but you know, thank God I'm here, and you know, the goal is to take the talents back home very soon. Yeah.
Okay, so when you came here, were you coming here to perform as an actor?
No, not at all. You know, when I got here, my parents just really wanted a better life for us, and you know, I was blessed to leave the country right before Civil War took over. But you know, performing is just something that I just kind of discovered while I was out here. Started in theater in Atlanta with my mentor Freddie Hendricks, and just, you know, the journey just been going ever since.
Okay, so give us a little bit of your inner Fela right now.
Everybody say yeah, yeah.
All right, give me a little more.
I didn't know I was going to perform today.
Oh yeah, I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, you know, Fela, one of Fela's favorites. Well, my favorite Fela song is Zombie. You know, and Fela talk about how the Nigerian military were like zombies. You know, zombie no go unless you tell them to go. Zombie no go stop unless you tell them to stop.
Okay, so listen, Dwayne, how long is the show going to continue?
The show is going to run till the 20th. We've just got extended for one more week, so we're running at the Only Theater till the 20th of this month. So come and see the show and come dance with us. It's a very interactive show, so be prepared to dance and sing along with us too as well.
Fantastic. Last question, what's next for you, Dwayne?
Well, once I leave here, I'm gonna head to New York, and I'm gonna meet with the original Broadway cast, and then we're going on tour with the Fela concert. And then after that, I also have a one-man show that I'm working on called Across the Waters that tells my story from coming from Sierra Leone to America. So hopefully I'll be there in December, you know, performing for my people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and continue to break a leg tonight.
Absolutely.
And in the future.
And we'll see you on Sunday.
Yes,
come see the show. Absolutely.
That's it for today's entertainment now. Esther, back to you.
Very entertaining, Heather. And Dwayne, thank you very much. Be sure to join Heather Maxwell for Entertainment Report here every Friday on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.